Hi, I'm Lorna. Last week, I stood in front of my entire family at what was supposed to be my promotion party and watched my mother hand the spotlight to my sister instead. I held a speech I never got to finish, smiled through a celebration that wasn't mine, and that was just the beginning. Tell me, have you ever been invited just to be ignored? The backyard smelled like lemongrass and overcooked salmon. White string lights stretched from fence to fence, glowing against the low sun like little lies hanging in the air. I stood at the edge of the patio in a navy sheath dress. Simple, neutral, not loud. Just enough to say, I'm here. I belong. I clutched my folded speech in one hand, a printed copy I'd revised 5 times that week. It was supposed to be a moment, my moment. A small slice of acknowledgement for the years I spent climbing in silence, working through weekends while everyone else had birthdays and spa retreats. Mom approached me like she was late to a brunch and didn't want to be rude. She gave a brief half hug, one of those one-shoulder leans that never touched your heart. "You look professional," she said with a tight smile. "Just remember, keep it short and sweet. No need to exhaust everyone with office stuff." I nodded, swallowing something sharp. "Oh, and Janelle might want to say a few words after. You know how creative spirits are. Just be flexible." Flexible. That word again. I'd bent so often in this family, I didn't know what standing straight felt like anymore. The guests began to gather around the outdoor buffet. Dad cleared his throat, tapping a spoon against his wine glass with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a weather report. "Thanks for coming," he said. "We're proud of our Lorna. She's always been practical, reliable, and now, a department head." A few claps followed. I stepped forward, unfolded my paper, and inhaled. "I don't usually talk about myself," I began, "but today I wanted to thank the people who taught me, directly and indirectly, how to survive in this world." 3 lines in. That's when Mom stood up, loudly, clapped over me. "Before Lorna continues," she beamed, "I just have to say, our dear Janelle has recently finished her sound healing course in Sedona. She's bringing so much light and balance to her clients." The crowd turned to Janelle, who offered a delicate bow and a humble little laugh. People raised glasses. Someone murmured, "She's so centered." I looked at my paper, my words, my work. I refolded the page and stepped back without saying a word. No one noticed. No one asked. I spent the rest of the evening smiling for photos that would never be printed, answering questions about Janelle's practice, and clearing glasses someone assumed I should clear. Later, under the table, I pulled the speech from my bag, tore it in half, and let the pieces fall into my purse like broken wings. The coffee in their kitchen still tasted like metal. Maybe it was the old filter, or maybe just memory clinging to the rim of the mug. I stood there in the hush of early morning, letting the silence press down while the rest of the house pretended to sleep. A sliver of sunlight crept through the blinds and fell on the living room wall, the family wall, as Mom called it. Dozens of frames, neatly aligned, smiling faces in coordinated colors. Janelle in ballet recitals, Janelle at Juilliard, Janelle on a hiking trip with Dad in Colorado. My eyes scanned each row, and then I saw it, the photo from Aunt Karen's wedding. I remembered that day clearly, the rose garden, the linen dress, the awkward group shot we took just before the ceremony started. I'd been standing next to Dad, one hand on my hip, smiling despite the heel blister. But in this version, I wasn't there. The right edge of the frame was sliced clean. The background shrub was intact, the lighting even, but the place where I stood, gone. I stepped closer, fingertips grazing the glass. The cut wasn't accidental. No tear, no jagged border. It was deliberate, silent, surgical. I didn't say anything. There was no one to say it to. And maybe that was the point. Later that morning, over a too-sweet cinnamon roll, one of Mom's friends leaned toward me, eyes warm with nostalgia. "Do you have any baby pictures of you and Janelle? I remember you two being inseparable when you were toddlers." Mom smiled, tilting her head. "Oh, we must have misplaced them during the remodel last year. You know how these things go." I didn't reply. I just got up quietly and went to the old hallway cabinet, the one where the photo albums had always been kept. Top shelf, blue spine, slightly peeling corners. I could find them in the dark. Except now there was nothing. just a stack of takeout menus and a dusty vase full of fake lilies. I sat on the floor for a long while. When I was little, I used to flip through those albums every summer. I'd trace my fingers along my milestones, first steps, scraped knees, fifth grade science fair. I knew which photos would stick, which ones were slightly curled, which ones Grandma had captioned in her shaky handwriting. And now, nothing. There hadn't been a fight, no screaming match, no door slammed behind me, just silence, and then erasure. There's a particular ache in realizing you weren't erased because you did something wrong. You were erased because you made it easier for them to tell a story that didn't include you. I walked to the staircase and sat 2 steps from the top. The light hit the opposite wall, blank where old photos used to hang. My shadow stretched across it, a shape they hadn't managed to cut out yet. I pulled out my phone, thumb trembling only slightly, scrolled through old folders until I found the one photo that still grounded me, Grandma and me at my college graduation. She was wearing that ridiculous wide-brimmed hat, and I was laughing so hard I almost dropped my diploma. I bookmarked it, then tucked it into a private album I renamed Proof I Existed. The kitchen smelled like oranges and dish soap. Morning light bled through the curtain edge, casting soft shapes on the linoleum floor. I walked in barefoot, trying not to disturb the silence, but they were already there. Mom stood by the stove, humming something classical. Janelle leaned against the counter, sipping oat milk from a glass too delicate for her lazy grip. And on her neck, there it was, the necklace. Delicate gold, with a tiny blue stone in the center, barely catching the light. I remembered it better than I remembered my own middle name. Grandma had given it to me on my 17th birthday, right before I left for state college. I'd worn it under every blazer, through every exam, every interview. It wasn't just jewelry. It was proof that someone once saw me as precious. "That used to be mine," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "Grandma gave it to me." Janelle didn't even blink. She brushed her hair back like she was in a commercial. "It didn't suit you," she said simply. "Mom thought it looked better on me." Mom turned from the stove, drying her hands on a towel. "Well, it was just sitting in the drawer. Nobody claimed it in years." She said it like it was a sweater or a pen, not a piece of memory that had a pulse. My throat burned, not with anger yet, but with recognition. This wasn't about the necklace. It never was. It was about rewriting stories so that I disappeared, line by line, chapter by chapter. I walked away before I could cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew tears in that house were currency. They only mattered if they came from the right face. I ended up in the garage, dust on boxes, cobwebs on corners, the place where things were stored until they were forgotten. I knew what I was looking for even before I saw it. An old stationery box, yellowed with time. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded envelope with my name in Grandma's handwriting. Lorna. Just that. No nickname, no sweetheart, just my name, like a full stop. I opened the letter. The ink was faded but intact. "Lorna, this is yours. You've always carried grace the quiet way. Don't ever let them take that from you." I didn't cry then either. I just pressed the paper flat against the garage floor, smoothing the wrinkles that someone else had made. I remembered the day she gave me that necklace. I had come home late, tired from my part-time shift. She waited up for me, held out the box like it was nothing, but her eyes shimmered like it was everything. I remember hugging her too tightly. I remember telling her thank you through a throat that didn't quite work. I remember thinking, this means I matter. That memory had teeth now. I tucked the letter into my wallet. As I walked back into the house, I passed the living room, where the necklace still sparkled against Janelle's tanned collarbone. I didn't look twice, but in my head I whispered, not again. The acceptance email arrived just before midnight. I'd been refreshing the portal every hour since noon, my hands clammy, heart in my throat. When the subject line popped up, "Congratulations, Lorna Gale," I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen and whispered, I did it. Full tuition, 4 years, out of state, but it didn't matter. I had done it. I printed everything out, cost sheets, dorm estimates, scholarship award letters, and laid them out on the dinner table the next night. I waited until the pasta bowls were cleared and the mood was light. I practiced my pitch in my head like I was presenting to the board. "I got the scholarship," I said softly, sliding the papers across. Mom reached for her wine glass, barely looking down. "That's great, honey. I'll need help with housing, though. The scholarship doesn't cover room and board." She waved a hand like she was brushing crumbs off the table. "We're saving for Janelle's music expenses, remember? She has her Juilliard applications next year. Those things aren't cheap." Dad didn't even lift his eyes from his phone. "You picked an out-of-state school. You figure it out." And that was that. A few days later, I walked into the living room to find Janelle beaming, both hands clasped over her mouth. A black baby grand stood in the center of the carpet like a prized animal. "It's a performance-grade Yamaha," Mom said proudly. "We want her to have every advantage." I said nothing. I clapped politely. Janelle wept from excitement. I swallowed mine. Later that week, I dropped off an application at a local bookstore near campus. Part-time. I'd work evenings, study late, sleep less. I'd manage. I never got a call back. Aunt Anita was the one who found out. She knew the manager through church and mentioned me in passing. The manager had frowned. "Oh, the student? Yeah, her mother called, said she's overwhelmed and shouldn't be working. Told us it'd be best not to consider her." I didn't feel betrayed. That word implies you expected something. I felt hollow. They didn't just step back when I needed support. They leaned forward and pulled the rug themselves. Back in my dorm room, I sat on the floor with my back against the door and wrote one line on a yellow sticky note. They clipped my wings while smiling at my fall. I stuck it to the wall above my desk and never mentioned it again. Years later, I would take that same note, fold it and fade it, and tuck it into my promotion folder. And when the email came, subject promotion confirmed, I didn't run to call anyone. I didn't text a soul. I just read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. Some news doesn't need to be shared. Some wins are just for you. I spread everything out on the kitchen table like I was setting up for surgery. Transcript, essay draft, FAFSA forms, copies of my awards. I even had a checklist just to keep from missing anything. The scholarship deadline was 2 days away, but I needed every minute to make it perfect. Janelle strolled in mid-conversation, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear, glass of cranberry juice in hand. She was laughing loudly. Something about an audition gone wrong and someone else's outfit looking like a polyester nightmare. She paced as she talked, weaving around the chairs like she couldn't see I was there. Then she spun toward the fridge, caught the corner of the table, and the glass tipped. It was slow motion, crimson liquid arcing like a warning flare, before splattering across half the documents. Pages soaked, ink running like mascara after a storm. I gasped and lunged, lifting the papers one by one, shaking them gently. My essay bled at the margins. My transcript was now tinted like shame. "Oh my God," I whispered, breath caught. "Why weren't you watching?" Janelle didn't pause her call. She just shrugged, mouthed, "Oops," and walked out of the room. Mom came in seconds later, holding her car keys and sunglasses. She glanced at the mess, then at me on my knees, trying to dry a soaked envelope. "Why would you put something so important there?" she said sharply. "You know how cluttered this kitchen gets. You always leave things everywhere." Not a word about the spill. Not a glance toward the hallway Janelle had vanished down. Just that tone. Frustrated, exasperated, disappointed. At me. That night I couldn't sleep. My backup essay was saved online, but the moment had stained more than paper. I walked past Janelle's room on my way to the bathroom. Her door was cracked open. She was on the phone again, voice hushed but clear. "She seriously thinks she's getting that scholarship," she said, laughing softly. "What she really needs is a lesson in humility." A pause. Then, "No one likes a try-hard. She's a walking syllabus. She won't last a semester without crying." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, heart thudding like it was knocking to get out. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the realization behind them. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a sister being careless or clueless. This was curated, intentional, sabotage wrapped in sugar. That was the night I stopped defending her in my head. I didn't tell Grandma. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened a blank notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote, "The things I will no longer allow." And underneath that, in shaky pen, "Being the quiet one. Being blamed for standing too close to the fire someone else set. Being erased by someone I used to protect." I stared at the ceiling in the guest room, the fan spinning overhead with a rhythm that matched the questions in my head. I hadn't slept, not really, not since I heard her say it, that I needed a lesson in humility, that I was a problem. And suddenly, I was 10 years old again. It was a Saturday morning. I had begged Grandma to make her special peanut butter and honey sandwich. I'd eaten it dozens of times before. But something was different that day. Maybe it was a new jar. Maybe something shifted in my body. Either way, 3 bites in, I knew something was wrong. My throat closed slowly, like hands wrapping around it from the inside. I remember falling, my hands clawing at nothing, my voice gone. The kitchen tile was cold beneath my cheek. Everything blurred. Sounds warped. Grandma moved fast. She didn't ask questions. She just picked up the phone, shouted into it, held me against her chest until the ambulance came. Her voice steady, her hands shaking. I remember the feel of her cardigan, the scratch of her bracelet. I remember her saying, "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just breathe." I woke up in the hospital bed an hour later. Mom arrived 20 minutes after that, annoyed, scrolling on her phone. "Are you serious?" she said, barely looking at me. "It was a sandwich, Lorna. You need to stop overreacting." I was still connected to oxygen. The nurse said it was a severe allergic reaction, a new diagnosis, life-threatening if untreated. Mom rolled her eyes. "She's always been dramatic." I learned something that day. The people who are supposed to keep you alive aren't always the ones who do. A week later, I drew the hospital bed. It was the only way I knew how to process it. Crayons. A stick figure version of me lying there. Grandma sitting beside me, her hand holding mine, her smile calm. I even drew the heart monitor with wavy green lines, a child's version of trauma management. When I showed it to Mom, proud and scared and small, she barely glanced at it. "Why would you keep this?" she said sharply. "It's disturbing. Tear it up." I did, right in front of her. Because back then, I still believed that obeying was safer than speaking. Now, years later, I sat upright in the same guest bed. The ceiling hadn't changed, but I had. "They didn't ignore me by accident," I whispered. "They did it because it was easier." I reached under the bed and pulled out my old travel bag. At the very bottom, between folded socks and my backup charger, was a folder labeled Emergency. Inside was a fresh EpiPen, a power bank for my phone, my ID, a printed copy of my will. Not just a plan, a promise to myself. I wasn't just staying overnight anymore. I was preparing to never need this room again. I picked up my phone and opened the clock app. Set a new alarm, 6:07 a.m., label, "Wake up before they do." I was supposed to meet Ava for coffee. We hadn't seen each other in years, since graduation. But she'd messaged me a few days earlier after seeing the promotion post. "Let's celebrate you," she'd said. She meant well. People like her always did. I got dressed, even put on mascara. But when I opened Facebook to check the cafe address, the memory popped up. It was a school photo, 10th grade. My smile looked fine at first glance, but when I leaned closer, I noticed the sleeve, pulled down slightly more than usual. I remembered that week, the anxiety scratching, the scabs behind my arm that I never let the nurse see. There hadn't been bruises exactly, just tension that lived under the skin, a silence that rubbed raw. "I wasn't hurt," I whispered. "I was erased." I didn't go to coffee. Instead, I drove in circles around town until I found myself parked in front of a CVS, hands on the wheel, heart somewhere in the back seat. It brought me back. Back to that day in the living room, mid-high school, the air thick with unspoken things. Valerie and Eldon sat across from me, their faces unreadable, but not unfamiliar. The school counselor had called home. I'd confided in Miss Jennings after class. Told her I didn't feel safe. Told her the house always felt cold, even with the heater on. She'd said she was proud of me for speaking. Mom and Dad did not. "You want to embarrass us?" Dad said calmly, his eyes sharper than his voice. "You want to make us look like monsters to strangers?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "If this family ends up in gossip, Don't come back here and call yourself our daughter, he finished. I nodded. Because what else do you do when you realize your voice has consequences? The week before that, I'd stood in the kitchen with Mom. She was chopping carrots for dinner when I mentioned the conversation I had with my teacher. Just casually, just hoping maybe she'd be glad I reached out for help. She dropped the knife. You're trying to ruin us? She shouted. You want to play victim? You want to see real problems, Lorna? Keep talking. See where it gets you. 3 days of silence followed. They didn't ground me, didn't scold me. They just acted like I didn't live there. I never told anyone again. Back in the car, I stared at the steering wheel, thumbs pressed so hard they turned white. The engine hummed quietly. People passed by carrying iced lattes and reusable shopping bags, unaware that the girl in the silver sedan was unraveling in slow motion. It's one thing to not be loved, I whispered. It's another to be punished for needing it. I looked at the dashboard clock. Ava would be waiting, probably ordering for both of us, still believing I'd walk through that door and smile like nothing cracked inside. I turned off the ignition, and instead of texting Ava, I opened a new message. To Grandma. Can we talk? Just you and me? The food smelled wrong. At first, I thought it was the sauce, maybe too rich, too creamy. Something in it tugged at an old memory, one I didn't want. I pushed the plate slightly away and reached for my water, but everyone was already digging in, clinking glasses and complimenting the chef like this was some grand gala instead of a family trap disguised as a celebration. I took a bite, then another. By the third, my throat began to itch. Not a normal itch, the kind that blooms fast, tightens everything, sets your skin buzzing from the inside. I touched my neck, swallowed once, nothing, twice. The swallow stuck. My heart stumbled. I pushed back from the table. No one noticed. It wasn't until my fork clattered to the floor that Grandma looked up, eyes widening, voice cutting through the laughter like a siren. She's reacting! Get her EpiPen! Call 911! Panic bloomed around the table. Chairs scraped. Someone knocked over a glass. Emma shouted instructions to Siri while Grandma rummaged through my bag, pulling out the injector with shaky hands. And Janelle? She stood still. She lifted her wineglass slowly, sipped, and smiled like she was enjoying a private joke. Can't believe she's still this sensitive, she muttered under her breath. It's a joke. My eyes met hers for a second, and in that glance, I saw it. The victory. The certainty that this wouldn't stick to her, that she would laugh about it later. As the paramedics wheeled me out, I could hear her laughing behind me, genuinely amused. At the hospital, I came back slowly, bit by bit, like surfacing from under ice, my throat raw, my body trembling. But my mind, it was clear, cold. Aunt Anita and Emma were already there. Emma's face was pale, eyes wide. She posted something, Emma said, handing the phone to Anita, while you were being taken out. A boomerang video, the dinner table, candles flickering, wine being poured, the caption in bold white text, Drama Queen ruins another night. Classic. My hands curled so tightly the IV tube tugged. Anita gritted her teeth. This ends now. Later that evening, after they left the room, Emma returned quietly. I didn't mean to record this, she said, pulling up a video on her phone. But I got it. Before the toast. The screen showed Janelle, walking to the buffet, looking around. She reached into her purse, a small jar. She unscrewed the lid, scooped something out, stirred it gently into my plate. She looked up, directly into Emma's lens, and whispered, She'll never know. She's too focused on impressing everyone. I watched it 3 times, said nothing. Then I asked Emma to airdrop it to me. Back in my hospital bed, I opened my private drive, created a new folder titled, Truth, Finally. I uploaded the video, then I opened notes and drafted a caption. I was poisoned, by my sister. Here's the video. I copied it, opened Instagram, pasted. My finger hovered over the blue post button. My phone buzzed. Incoming call. Dad. The phone stopped buzzing after the 3rd day. At first, it was relentless. Voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, DMs from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, text threads lighting up with words like sorry, shocked, can't believe. A few defended her. More didn't. And Janelle? She posted a video, angled lighting, gentle music, puffy eyes, and a sweater that looked 2 sizes too big. Her voice trembled. "We all make mistakes," she said. "But I never intended harm. It was taken out of context. I've already lost so much." The comments were swift. People didn't believe her tears anymore. That morning, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by silence thicker than anything I'd known. There was no celebration, no balloons, no closure shaped like an apology, just breath. And breath was enough. Grandma called around noon. "Come meet me at the park," she said. "Just us." The grass was damp, the bench slightly crooked. She handed me a plain envelope. "I updated the paperwork," she said, eyes never leaving mine. "You're my only heir, and not because of what happened, because of who you are." I didn't speak, didn't cry. Anita texted later that night. "You didn't break this family, you finally told the truth out loud." In the following weeks, Janelle's collaborations disappeared. Brand deals paused. A few quiet unfollows from influencers. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet. I didn't press charges. Not because I forgave her, but because some stories deserve to end in silence, not in spectacle. I moved into a small home on the outskirts of Evanston, one with a yard big enough for a garden and a porch that creaked when I stepped just right. I unpacked slowly, one box each morning, one drawer at a time. The EpiPen went into the top kitchen drawer. The letter from Grandma, framed. The necklace, back in my jewelry box where it belonged. I planted rosemary that spring, mint and thyme beside it, and a tiny tag stuck into the soil, handwritten in pencil. Still here. Every morning I watered it, I whispered that phrase to myself. Still here, not untouched, not whole, but here. One morning I looked up at the sky, soft and pale and impossibly wide, and said aloud, "Maybe I'll never hear I'm sorry." Then smiled. "Maybe I won't need to. Sometimes what we survive doesn't make us stronger, it makes us quieter. But silence isn't peace, it's delay. And if there's anything this story has taught me, it's that clarity isn't cruelty, it's courage. I used to think holding my pain in was noble. That family meant keeping the secrets that hurt. But now I know, healing starts the moment we tell the truth, even if our voice shakes. So, what about you? Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to lose yourself? Do you believe loyalty means hiding the damage or showing the truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Press 1 inch if this story touched you, or tell me what part felt closest to your heart. Let me know where you're watching from. And if this video made you pause, reflect, or even cry, don't just scroll. Subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next story, because healing isn't a destination, it's a conversation. And I want you in it.